Let me take you on a quick journey through this psalm. The simple lesson of the 142nd Psalm is that we can use depressing times to grow. Depression is much like a little light on your dashboard of your car. We don't have lights anymore. We have messages, and the Suburban has this little panel. It says, tire pressure low. You know what that means? That doesn't mean I should go, that means I have an opportunity. Either I can do something about the low tire pressure, or I will be on the side of the road somewhere. It says oil needs changing, or you're overheated, or low fuel. Again, I can either just be upset and angry at the car, or I can do something about it. See, it's an opportunity. It's actually a blessing, those warnings. And depression is a warning that there's something we need. And we can grow through those times. And we can use that time to grow. One of the greatest truths we can discover is that these cave times, when we feel trapped and imprisoned by our circumstances and emotions, usually accomplish great discoveries about God. David is at the depths of his loneliness. He's been on the run for years, and now he's hiding in a desolate cave in a crowd of malcontents. He's feeling so alone, and he has two choices. Stay in the cave of loneliness, descend into self-pity, and sin, or look up and use it as a time to grow. And thank God, 3,000 years ago, he looked up and he used it as a time to grow. And Psalm 142 is the classic confession of David when he was a caveman, when he was alone and depressed. And God satisfied him completely as David discovered great things about God. Remember, a heart that flees to God for refuge always is cared for. Remember the cities of refuge, how we always started this? A city of refuge was a completely supplied place. Everything you need when you went there, you got. It was a place that the doors were never locked and it was always open, and a place that was easy to access, and you could always find it. It was usually on a main road, and that there were people pointing and couriers running. Always remember those wonderful truths, because cave times are, first of all, usually accompanied by great distress. I just want to repeat them for you. Look at verse 3. In the middle of the great troubles around, look what David said at the beginning of verse 3. David felt overwhelmed in spirit. You notice what he says in verse 3. He says, my spirit was overwhelmed within me. Now, what is that like in our lives? It's like when someone says, the roof is caving in on me, or everything is going wrong all at once, or it always happens to me, or we say, not now. Or here's the worst one. You go to see your doctor and they put on this smile like this and they say, I have some bad news for you. And you just go, not now. Not me. That wasn't on the plan. And that's when we get this overwhelmed in spirit. And that's what he had. Second thing, look at the end of verse 3. David thought his adversaries had hidden a trap for him. He says that they are trying to get me. They are secretly setting a snare at the end of verse 3 for me. They're setting a trap. They're all after me, sometimes we feel. I've been railroaded. I've been framed. The people set me up for this. We go through this in life where we feel like they plan that to happen to me. And David was going through that feeling. The third one he's going through. Look at verse 4. He says, no one cares for my soul at the end. He says, nobody cares about me. Now, this is another avenue that we go through. David feared that no one regarded him. People say, nobody called me. You ever heard that? That people say, I'm all upset at the church because no one called me. It's true. We're big enough that probably someone thought someone else called him. David felt that way. He says, no one called me. I'm a nobody. I'm all alone. Poor me. So see, that was a choice. He had that feeling that no one cared about him. And either he could descend into self-pity and focus completely on his own problem, or he could just make another choice. And see, it doesn't take away the feeling. He didn't lose the feeling no one cared about him, but he fled to the one who he knew did care for him. See, that's where faith comes in, and that's what he exercises. The next one, look at, continuing to what he says, that there is no one that cares for me, verse 4. Refuge has failed me. He says, my way out. He thought the cave was his way out, his refuge. He says, there's no escape for me. This place I thought was my escape, It's not a refuge. Refuge has failed me. There's no escape. And sometimes in life we go through things like saying, I'm on a one-way trip to nowhere with my job. That I'm just, as they say at the employment office, well, you're too old for that, for that job. You're too old. You don't. I'm sorry, but the qualifications for this position are... And see, in life, we go through this same feeling David's going through. He said that there was no escape for him, that the refuge he'd sought. And then he goes on to say, not only did no one regard him at the end of the verse, but he says, no one cares for my soul at the end of the verse. No one even knew he was missing. Where he fled for help didn't count. At the end of verse 4, and nobody even cares. And sometimes we get that feeling too. Have you ever let that deadening thought cross your mind? It'll bring gloom to your heart as fast as a storm front brings a thunderstorm here in Oklahoma. If you just think, nobody cares for me, nobody calls me, I have nowhere to go, no escape for me, they're setting traps for me, just go down the line. And that's the great distress that cave times are accompanied by. But look at the great discovery, starting in verse 5, because I want to emphasize the positive. Because cave times not only are accompanied by great distress, but they usually accomplish great discoveries. And this is the conscious choice we have to make. Verse 5, look what he says. I cried to you, O Lord, and said, and look at the series of truths that he discovers in this cave about the Lord. Number one, he says, you are my refuge. Secondly, my portion in the land of the living. No one else cares for me? You care for me. Nowhere to escape? You're my way to escape. Again, he didn't get out of the cave. In the cave, he found the Lord was there. See, that's what's so interesting. The Lord did not deliver the 3 Hebrew children from the fiery furnace. He came into the furnace with them. And that's what we have to look at these times in our life, that it is the Lord coming into it with us, not delivering us out of it and taking it away initially or sometimes even ever. Continuing, he says, verse 6, attend to my cry. You're the one that listens to me. Even though no one cares about me, listen to my cry, verse 6, for I'm brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors. You're the one that can deliver me. I can't deliver myself. I can't escape. They're stronger than I am. Verse 7 is the heartbeat. Bring my soul out of prison. What he's saying is, relieve or set me free, undo the shackles enough so that I can do these things. Number one, so that I can praise your name. Now you know that you're bordering on a time when you have to make a choice in the right direction when you can't praise the Lord. Sadness and kind of, slowing down and just, melancholy and all that stuff. But when you come to the point where you can't praise the Lord, that's when you have to cry out to Him and say, Lord, I want you to bring my soul out of prison that I may praise your name so that the righteous will surround me. And often that's a choice for us to go where the righteous are. The Bible does not say that it is incumbent on everyone. The shepherds are supposed to chase the sheep, but the sheep are supposed to stay here and minister to one another. And so if you want to be surrounded by the righteous, then you need to come to where the righteous gather so that they can have that precious ministry in your life. For you shall deal bountifully with me. Cave times open ways we never dreamed of for knowing God intimately. And here they are. I'll go back through this list of the things that he discovered starting in verse 5, but I'll say them in a different way and try and underline them in your mind. When depressed, I learned that you alone are my true refuge. At any time, anywhere. Depression means it's time to flee to the Lord, my refuge. I will believe your promise and I will turn to you as my refuge right now. That's the first choice we make. The first choice that David found to get out of his soul being imprisoned was, he said, I choose to flee to you right now as my refuge. Now you notice, look what I said in verse 1. He cried out loud. Sometimes you actually will have to say, instead of going, there, I just said it in my mind. Did anybody hear it? No. Sometimes we actually have to say it for our own benefit so we hear it and say, Lord, help me. Help me. sometimes we just need to preach to ourselves. We just need to say what we believe. And it's amazing. David verbally, now he could have done this all, in his mind. But the example he had is, it's kind of like I showed you this morning. When we comfort the small-souled ones, it says to audibly speak in their ear. Now, I could just sit in my study and pray for them, but I'm commanded to speak to them in their ear. And we have to sometimes go up to people and not just pray for them and not just point them to the Bible. We have to talk to them. And David had to talk to himself. And depression means it's time to flee to the Lord. And he said, I will believe your promise. I will turn to you as my refuge right now. The second part of verse 5, when depressed, I learned that you are my true portion. You notice he says that? He says, you are my portion. A portion means just what I need. When you have little children and you're feeding them off your plate, you don't just, cut a half a carrot and hand it to them, when they're, just tiny and don't even have they're gumming everything. You take it and you chop it all up and you mash it and you make it so it's just for them. Lord, you're the one that makes my portion. You know just what I need. And he says, I learn when I'm depressed that you are my true portion. Depression means it's time to feed on the Lord as your portion. And we say, I will believe your promise to be all I need in this hard time. I will believe you. I believe that you're the one I flee to, and I'm going to believe your promise. What's a promise? Those are good things to memorize. The Lord said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. I'm with you always. I am your portion. The Lord is my portion. That's in the Psalms. We have to learn those promises that he says there's no temptation, but such as is common. We all have the same, but he always makes an exit sign so we can get out of it. And so we have to believe his promise. So, number one, David says, it's time to flee the Lord. Number two, it's time to feed on the Lord as my portion, taking a bit of his word, just what I need. Look at verse 6. When depressed, I learned that you are my true listener. You see what it says in verse 6? Attend to my cry. You are the one that really listens. You're the one who cares. You're the one who hears. Depression means it's time to speak to the Lord. I will believe your promise. I will pour out my trouble to you who care for me. You notice in the Psalms, repeatedly, David gives us this example of pouring out all of his woes to the Lord. It's amazing how you can just load onto the Lord all of your burdens, as it says in the 37th Psalm, roll your burden on the Lord and he'll sustain you. And you and I can just speak them all, and we can almost feel the load lightening as we give them to the Lord. So often we take them back, and that's what worrying is, meditating on our problems and going over and over on, instead of believing his promise and rolling them onto him. So the third thing that David learned is, when he's depressed, he said, you're my true listener. I will speak to you. I will believe you. I will pour out my troubles to you because you really care for me. Verse 7, the fourth thing he learned. He said, when I'm depressed, I will learn that you alone are the true deliverer. He says, you are the one, in verse 7, who will bring my soul out. You're the deliverer. You're the one I'm counting on. Now, someone, of course, came up to me after morning service and they said, what about medication? I said, what about medication? I'm not, a pharmacologist, and I'm not going to comment on medications and all that. I will say this. The only lasting, the only complete, the only enduring help is from the Lord. But if you take any kind of medication, then you believe in medication. So medication is a part of the equation, but it doesn't bring, medications cannot affect your spirit. They cannot affect your eternal soul. Your body can get it down, but medications can't heal it. They can help. And I'm not an anti-drug person, nor am I a proponent of living on those things. But I do say this, it's the Lord who brings us out. And sometimes some people need, when I used to be at Grace Church, there was one fella, if he didn't take his lithium, he would come and get John in his office with knives and bring his dog. And the police, while I was on staff there, the police used to come and get that guy all the time. And he would come and try to get MacArthur with his knives. And John would always say through the door, take your lithium. He'd say, take your lithium. And the police would get him and give him his lithium, and he'd be back in church the next week, sitting in the front, smiling. The Lord brings our refuge to us, and He is our deliverer. He comes and helps us. And depression means it's time to trust the Lord, my Redeemer. And I will believe your promises, and I will let you rescue me now. Sometimes we don't want the Lord to rescue us. Sometimes we enjoy being sad and having all the attention. But He says, no, I don't want this. This is enough, Lord. I want you to rescue me now. Look at the end of verse 7. He said there that you alone are the true object of my worship. He says, I want to praise your name. When depressed, I learned that you alone are my true object of worship. You love and accept my worship. David knew that. He knew that there's something that God sought, and that was true worship. And he says, you are the one I want to worship. And when my soul's imprisoned, I'm not doing very well at worshiping you. So I want you to deliver me so I can worship you. And that's a secret that he found. You are the object of my worship. And depression means it's time to offer worship to the Lord. I will believe your promise. I will worship you even when I don't feel like it. And that's a real lesson we need to learn. Do you remember Pilgrim's Progress? A lot of people don't read it anymore. Do you remember when they were in the giant of despair's castle, how they got out? The key was the promise, and they started praising the Lord, and they started singing, and it got brighter and brighter and brighter, and the giant tipped over and they got out. And wasn't Bunyan graphically showing that it's time to praise, it's time to worship, it's time to claim those promises? And the last one is at the end of verse 7. When depressed, I learned that you alone are my true provider. It says, you will surround me with the righteous. Depression means it's time to rest in the Lord in His provision. I will believe your promise. I will let you surround me with everything I need. I will let you provide for me. So what did David learn? David learned that the Lord was his refuge at any time, anywhere. His portion, just what he needed. His listener, the one who cared and would hear. His deliverer, the one who came right to where he was and helped him. The object of his worship, the one who loves to accept his worship. And his true provider, the one that would surround him with everything that he needed. Cave times are when we say, Lord, my refuge, you're my portion. O listening one, verse 6, hear my cry and rescue me. My God who provides the righteous together around me, you're sufficient. Verse 7. God wants us to learn to not run away from the dark times, but to run to Him. And to let Him unshackle us so that we can praise and worship and trust and cry out to Him. And then in His time, He delivers us. By the way, David got out of this cave not too long after this, and he ascends to the greatest times of his life. But he would never have been great, I really believe, if he hadn't gone through the cave times. Remember those imperatives. It says that we comfort one another with the comfort we ourselves have received of God.